Donald Trump's closest advisors have become a little bit more comfortable speaking out, albeit anonymously, about their concerns about Donald Trump's recent public appearances, rally speeches, interviews. They think that he's losing it, like he's damaging his ability to become president by going off on random tangents that have nothing to do with the concerns voters actually have, while scaring the hell out of people. And we want to give you some examples of this. So there's a great write-up in New York Times: Trump's meandering speeches motivate his critics and worry his allies. And so they took us back to 2020 and said that in the final weeks there of 2020 election, just 3% of voters recalled something specific that Mr. Trump had said about Mr. Biden, which is a fascinating stat when you think about it. Now, some Trump advisors and allies say privately they're concerned that the dynamic may be repeating itself 4 years later. They worry that his impetuousness and scattershot style on the campaign trail needlessly risk victory in battleground states where the margin for error is increasingly narrow. And the basic point there being, he theoretically has a strong position to campaign on. That inflation, which is now lower than it's been in like 4 years, was high for a while. Prices have been high. You can focus on that stuff. You can pin it to Joe Biden or to Harris or whatever. But that's not generally how he actually campaigns. Like, just saying she's low IQ, that's not a message that really sells you versus them. Comparing how the country was for 4 years under you, how it has been under Joe Biden. Instead, it's sharks and it's cannibals and it's Ave Maria and it's a bunch of nonsense. And when people go into the voting booth, what exactly are they attaching, like, mentally to you and your message that would make them want to support you? And so they're speaking out about it. One Trump advisor, David Urban, says when he's good, he's great. And when he's off message, he's not so great. I don't think anyone is really changing their mind at this point, but when he distracts from his biggest, broadest messaging, it is counterproductive because the Harris campaign uses it to turn out their voters. And sometimes, like, it's directly contradictory to his strategy. So this Saturday, he was in California. He went back to demonizing mail-in ballots. Like, for months now, they had gotten him to be like, stop attacking that. We need people to vote early. We need them to vote by mail. He forgot, I guess, and just went back to attacking them, which is great. He's been talking about the enemy within constantly, scaring people in that way. I love this anecdote, though. He did this one speech, and after about 25 minutes, he told the crowd he wanted to tell one quick story about a friend with a car plant in Mexico, but he never finished his tale. Instead, he lost the thread 1 minute later as he complained that if he mispronounced one word, he would be accused of being cognitively impaired. Then he botched the phrase by saying President Biden was the one who was cognitively repaired and referred to the election as 3.5 months away, not 3.5 weeks away. So yeah, I think you will be criticized, but not for the mispronunciation necessarily, for the entire thing. Now, he calls this the weave, but generally at the end of weaving, the threads shouldn't all still be like that, I don't think. And we have one more example. So about 20 minutes later, he seemed ready to wrap up his speech. He promised the crowd would see him again soon and said he was thinking about residents on the East Coast suffering after the recent storms. Quote, so in closing, I just want to say Kamala Harris is a radical left Marxist rated even worse than Bernie Sanders or Pocahontas. And then he proceeded to speak for 17 more minutes. So he doesn't even know what the end of his speech is supposed to be, when it's supposed to happen. Maybe he was just like, I don't know, itching to play some music, Brett. But yeah, I would be a little bit worried. I know that, everybody gets antsy before the election in terms of the advisors, but if you've been trying to push this strategy for months now that you should focus on the economy, it's just impossible to get him to do that.
So I've pushed back against this narrative that Trump rallies are somehow like the rambling is bad, but I have to reevaluate that. I kind of say I was wrong, and the reason for that is the wild swings. Because it's not just that he keeps talking and everyone's around and they got enough and then they left. It's now that he's just like, he literally stood there for a half hour playing music.
39 minutes.
Like that's thoroughly insane. Like there's no way that even like I'm like, oh, it's like, he goes out there and it's like when you see Aerosmith live, it's 95% greatest hits and then 5% like originals, and the originals are like, I don't know why you're doing this, but you did play the hits, so I'm hanging out. Like that's what but now he's just standing there. Like, and then also Like if Trump was my neighbor, I'd never go and get the mail.
I know what you mean. I know
Like that
exactly
thing
what
where
you mean.
he's just waiting there, like, hey, what's going on? I'm going to tell you a story now. And you're like, oh my God, this story is going to be like a weird complaint about how the government's listening on my phone. And it's the same one he always makes. But then sometimes he'll start telling me about other stuff. And I'll be like, Grandpa, you need to go back inside and sit down. And what's also making me reevaluate my previous take on Trump's mental like capacity and like it doesn't really matter is that like, I guess I was just looking at Biden, who was so much further along. But
Yeah.
now that his competitor is Kamala Harris, who like can put together sentences, goes on Fox News and actually like lays the smackdown and wins because Brett Baer is so used to interviewing Donald Trump and knowing they'll fix it in post. Like now it's so stark how thoroughly jello this guy's pudding head is.
Yeah, you're right. And look, I don't think that he's we've gone over this over the course of months. There are multiple different continuums that read as, oh, there's something wrong with this person. There's like typical old person stuff about how fast you speak, the tone of your speech, the energy, all of that. And then there's actual brain damage. And you can move up on both of those and you can have different ratios or whatever. I think that Joe Biden has a lot of the old man stuff and a little bit of the brain stuff. I think that Trump, up until recently, had relatively little of the old man stuff. Like he's definitely slower and more tired, but not to the extent that Biden is, and more of the brain damage stuff. But in addition to that, both of those rest on what were you like before? And if you were already bizarre, if you were already prone to tangents and everything, then those three things are not going to interact well. And so he was on shaky ground as a 40-year-old. Like there's not much left once it starts to decay. Thanks for watching our video. Did you know that you can support our show by becoming a subscriber? Just click the subscribe button and also ring the bell so that you get notifications when we're live or when we post new content.